Hello, comrades. Today, Antiglobalization Movement of Russia presents an interview with our comrade from African People's Socialist Party. Please, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Omali Yeshitela, and I'm the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, and I'm extremely happy to be here with the Russian Anti-Globalization Movement.
Yes, we are very glad to meet you here. And just can you tell us, please, something about your party, about your activity?
We are a revolutionary political party that was born in the United States, but that now exists in various continents, including Africa. We are also in the Caribbean, and we're throughout Europe, in Belgium, France, Germany, England, and Sweden. And our struggle began in the United States simply as a struggle to end the oppression of black people. Mm-hmm. And our practice in that endeavor forced us to see the world as a much larger thing than what was happening in the United States, and to also understand that African people throughout the world share the same national identity, but we've been forcibly dispersed against our will in the process of building the capitalist system itself. And we also were forced to learn that we are in the same situation in many ways as other oppressed peoples around the world. And we have since that time been building a movement for the liberation of Africa and African people, recognizing that it cannot come about without the defeat of imperialism itself, mm-hmm. and that it must be done in concert with oppressed peoples around the world, which is one of the reasons that we are here in Moscow for our first visit to be with the Russian Anti-Globalization Movement, that is an organization and movement that's attempting to unite the peoples and nations of the world in opposition to imperialism.
Okay, so you said that your party is for people who are under oppression. You help them. What do you mean under oppression? What do you mean? What does it mean, oppress people under oppression?
Well, we've got two aspects of it. When we say oppression, effectively, what we mean is people who are dominated by a particular system. In America, for example, you often hear the reference of it being a country, a nation of immigrants. Mm-hmm. But Africans are not immigrants in Americans. We are captives. That's how we happen to be in America. And though people often refer to Africans as citizens, we're not citizens, we are colonial subjects. And when you have a situation where the state acts as a force that denies rights, that takes life from people, annex their lands and do things like that, that is what we call oppression. But this is an oppression that also is related to economic exploitation. And most of the people who live under capitalist domination experience economic exploitation. Although all of them do not necessarily experience colonial oppression, most people who experience economic exploitation also have to feel political oppression, because that's the only means by which an unjust system can work. Mm-hmm. No slave is voluntarily going to be a slave, and no working person is voluntarily going to allow the value of her labor to be expropriated by somebody who does not work. So force is an absolute necessity, and that's what we mean when we talk about oppression.
So politics is always close to economics.
Yes.
If economy is oppressive, is economy for slavery and exploitation. So the political system also works for it.
It is, in fact. In fact, we can say that politics is in reality concentrated economics. And when you have a system that benefits a handful of people at the expense of the vast majority of the people, the politic of that system reflects that reality. And that's what most of us are confronted with.
Okay, I understand. And you mentioned that Americans, Afro-Americans, Black Americans that were brought to America as slaves are captives. But is the situation, is that historical situation is actual now? I mean, what's happened with Black Americans now with their civil rights? Can you call modern Black Americans captives?
We can call more than Africans captives. I mean, we're talking about a land, first of all, that was violently wrenched, taken from the indigenous population, many of whom have experienced near genocide, with many of the remaining group living in concentration camps that they call Indian reservations. That is an objective reality, and a people that have a lifespan in the 40s, that the average lifespan of a so-called Indian is in the 40s compared to Americans. And then you have a situation, and there's severe, vicious oppression to that indigenous population. The same thing is true of the Mexican people, whose land, half of Mexico, was stolen by America, and that theft was consolidated with the Treaty of Hidalgo that was forced down the Mexican throat at gunpoint in 1848. And it came about at the same time that gold was discovered in California. And then you have this false border that was created at gunpoint that stole California, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, etc., from the Mexican people. And both sides of the border, in Mexico proper and in occupied Mexico, the Mexican people are suffering. They're suffering economically, they're suffering politically, and special police organizations have been created in the United States to deal with the Mexican people. So it is an oppressive situation, and it is also true of Africans. And many people today are familiar with the growing movement in the United States among the African population that is a response to the police murders of African people, from a 7-year-old girl who was killed in her sleep in Detroit to 12-year-old youngster who was, and then there's Ferguson and New York and Cleveland. So a host of people. I don't know if people here are aware that within the last week or so, one policeman was found not guilty by a judge in Cleveland after a group of police fired more than 137 rounds into a car that was occupied by two unarmed Africans, a man and a woman. And one of those cops jumped on top of the hood of the car and fired his weapons several times into the car, firing at least 15 times into the car, and this person was just found not guilty of a crime by the police.
In what year did that happen?
That happened, well, the trial just happened last week. You can Google that, okay. Yeah, and he was found not guilty for that. Guilty. So this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the reality that we are suffering from. And as I said, it's not just an African reality. We see the African people and the indigenous population, the so-called Indian people, as two pillars of the American capitalist system as it was founded, on stolen land and with stolen black labor. And
everything's stolen.
Everything. There's nothing, and that's why I continue to talk about this, not only because I think it's important that the peoples of the world unite with the struggle of African people, but also because I think that you cannot truly understand the United States of America if you do not understand its genesis as stolen land on stolen property that grew itself to power and strength as a consequence of that relationship.
Okay. And what do you think this understanding you mentioned? What this understanding can help us? What it can give us? How can it help us to struggle with American imperialism?
I truly believe that America has succeeded in achieving a level of hegemony over the narrative that exists in the world during this time of crisis. That many people have been convinced about Americans' intentions in places like Ukraine, or its intentions even in the Middle East, where it has committed horrible crimes against millions of people dead, and various other places. But I think it would be much more difficult for that to happen if the peoples of the world were aware of America's crimes in the United States itself and its foundation, and were able to say loudly, how can America make claims against Russia around Crimea when it stole half of Mexico, when there are still traditional custodians of the land in America living in concentration camps. In many cases, they don't have running water, they don't have plumbing, etc.
So they have not appropriate living conditions.
No. And the living, and what people need to know is, here are the so-called Indians whose land Obama and his cruise missiles supposedly protecting, where the indigenous population have a lifespan only in the 40s. And where African people, where white people in America own wealth 22 times greater, not 22%, but 22 times greater than African people in the United States. That's a statement of factual, actual, material relationship. And I'm saying this is important because America says one thing about itself, but there's a different reality, and the world needs to know that. I believe that the anti-globalization movement, when it talks about America's crimes in various places around the world, when it talks about what America does with Ukraine, when it talks about what America does in the Middle East, with Iraq and the threats against Iran, with what it threatens against the people in Venezuela, I think that this movement and all movements must also demand reparations to the African population in the United States, freedom for the indigenous people, the end of the oppression and exploitation of the Mexican people and the indigenous people. I think if a real movement like that would take off, then it would neutralize the narrative that America is attempting to dominate around the world. It's an instance of a thief. In the case of America, it's an instance of a thief yelling, "Stop thief," chasing and going, "Stop thief," when it is in fact the real thief.
So the conclusion is that we should work together in making people aware of what's really happening in America, what's really happening in the world by Americans.
Yes.
Yes, and with this knowledge we can resist American imperialism and liberate ourselves and liberate other nations, other people,
yes,
from this oppression.
And when you do that, it's really important for Africans and Mexicans and the so-called Indians in America to know that they have allies, because then you are more likely to see on these so-called Indian reservations and the barrios, Mexican barrios and the African ghettos of America, you're more likely to see people who are willing to stand on the side of the Russian people who are being threatened, by American imperialism every day. It helps us to develop a level of cooperation. Yes. And practical cooperation, I think, is really important for us to discover.
Yes, our mutual goals can be taken, or can be only mutually. Yes, and maybe the last question is about the organization that exists in different countries of the world, as you mentioned. Yes. And maybe how many members do you have, or How many people support your party?
We have a small party, but membership is much larger than the members in our party. I was saying earlier today in another meeting that we are structured in many ways like the Bolsheviks were structured. And so there are cadre in our party, but we have created various mass organizations of the people who participate in our work. We have campaigns, for example, in Sierra Leone, where the Ebola crisis was centered. And we have many hundreds of members in that. We do rainwater harvesting, and we do some agricultural work with the people. We are not a charity or anything like that, but we have organized the people there and other places to participate in those projects.
It's like organizational power.
Yes. And in the United States, Sierra Leone, England, Sweden in particular, we have created an organization called the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. It's a mass organization. Some of the people are in the party, but some are not. The majority are not in the party. And these are people who are struggling around just basic democratic issues, issues of exploitation, oppression, what's happening with police violence, what's happening in the schools, what's happening on various levels of oppression and exploitation. And so many of these people are not in the party, but they work consciously under the leadership of the party. We organized in April an African National Women's Organization. We held conferences in Washington, D.C. and London in March. Washington, D.C. 1 week and the next week in London, organizing African women to bring women into the revolutionary project and to not only struggle against the specifics of the oppression of African women, but to contribute to women being able to participate in the revolutionary project itself. We created Black Star Industries, which is an overall economic umbrella for our organization because we are fighting for self-determination, self-reliance. So there are a number of projects like this that will bring in a lot of people who are not in the party. And so with that, you're talking about several hundred in some places, and then, a few thousand, like combined.
Okay.
Yes.
I understand. And the last question will be, do you have some connections with other parties or other organizations with the same interest as you? Not except maybe our anti-globalization
Yes.
movement.
We participated in the founding in Canada maybe a month ago of the Indigenous Peoples Liberation Party, which I understand already exists in the United States, but they open up a Canadian front. And I was there for that. And we also worked very, very, very close with the Mexican National Liberation Movement and some of the people who I think you have had here, we have relationships with. We've organized the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And this is an organization of a variety of organizations. We held the first national demonstration against the Obama regime in Washington, D.C., and the only demonstration against Obama by Africans in the United States. And so we do have and enjoy a number of relationships beyond just our own and beyond the African community. We conducted the first public solidarity conference with the people of Nicaragua in the late 1970s, before they actually won their liberation in 1979. And I was in Nicaragua in 1981 after the revolution was concluded there. We had an incredibly important relationship with the Irish Republican Socialist Party, and I was in Belfast in 1983 with that solidarity, with the Irish people as well. So we have a long history of internationalism and relationships with oppressed peoples and struggling peoples around the world.
Okay, thank you very much for your interview. It was really nice. It was a nice talk. And that was Anti-Globalization Movement of Russia. Thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.